The CCP's conniving behavior has become out in the open and more blatant these days. From its underhanded support of Russia in the Ukraine war and support of Iran in the Middle East, to its connections to Hamas and the attack on Israel. Recently, the CCP has engaged in a string of dangerous and warlike provocations. In the South China Sea, Beijing has been escalating tensions with the Philippines. Are CCP's egregious behaviors random acts of recklessness? Or are they calculated moves? What does the CCP want to achieve from the series of provocations? Hello, welcome to Leisrealtalk. I'm Lei. The CCP's reckless acts aren't accidental. They're calculated moves to test the United States and its allies, to identify the weakest link for the CCP to plan for future military operations. These incidents allow Beijing to 1. Observe the responses from the United States and its allies. 2. Determine their resolve in defending Taiwan. 3. It's a form of psychological warfare.
I would hope that there's a recognition that this was a point where the relationship moved forward.
Less than 10 days after Australia's pro-China Prime Minister Anthony Albanese made a historical visit to Beijing in early November, a Chinese Navy destroyer closed in on a disabled Australian frigate in international waters and used active sonar to harass divers who were conducting underwater repairs. This caused the sailors injuries. However, the Australian government didn't condemn the PLA's aggression and merely issued a statement saying the Australian government has expressed its serious concerns to the Chinese government following an unsafe and unprofessional interaction with the People's Liberation Army Navy destroyer. Forbes magazine said, rather than deal directly with the crisis, the Australian government buried the news, leaving Anthony Albanese to emerge from his otherwise fruitful international junket looking dangerously weak and out of touch. However, to the CCP, how the Australian government handled the incident provided valuable insight in assessing Albanese's resolve in confronting the CCP. In October, a Chinese fishing boat from Hong Kong was accused of dragging an anchor and damaging a critical gas pipeline in the Baltic Sea that connects two NATO countries, Finland and Estonia. It also damaged two telecom cables connecting Estonia to Finland and Sweden. Finland's Minister of European Affairs said it's hard to believe that sabotage to the undersea gas pipeline happened without Beijing's knowledge. He said, "I'm not the sea captain, but I would think that you would notice that you are dragging an anchor behind you for hundreds of kilometers. I think everything indicates that it was intentional." But Beijing denied the allegation and called for an objective, fair, and professional investigation. It is testing the Europeans and observing the responses from various different countries. The Biden administration has been enhancing partnership and building security cooperation alliances in the Indo-Pacific. From the CCP's perspective, bilateral or multilateral security agreements are only diplomatic maneuvers. They don't necessarily equate to the leader's resolve in a real military confrontation. CCP wants to test its opponents. The place where such a test is being carried out with the most intensity is in the South China Sea. Tensions between China and the Philippines have escalated in the past months. In February, a Chinese vessel used military-grade lasers on a Philippine Coast Guard vessel, temporarily blinding the crew on the bridge. The Filipino vessel was resupplying troops stationed at Second Thomas Shoal. On August 5th, Chinese Coast Guards fired water cannons at a Filipino boat that delivered supplies to troops on a warship grounded on the Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands. In October, during a Philippine operation to resupply the grounded warship, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel collided with a Philippine resupply boat after attempting to block it. A Chinese maritime militia boat also bombed a Philippine Coast Guard patrol vessel during the mission. On December 2nd, France and the Philippines signed a letter of intent in Manila to promote bilateral defense cooperation. The Philippines has also signed similar agreements with the United States and Australia. On the following day, however, a record 135 Chinese maritime militia vessels swarmed the area near Whitsun Reef. The next day, the USS Giffords traveled through the waters near Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands, and Beijing protested. The above series of events were to give the United States a stress test by the CCP. Beijing cannot test the United States in the Taiwan Strait. This is because once Beijing does something to Taiwan and a war breaks out, Beijing doesn't have the option of pulling back. It either wins or loses and cannot control the outcome. But in the South China Sea, the CCP has more control.
Next day in Washington, a first step is taken in the direction demanded by Dewey as the United States and the Philippines sign a mutual defense treaty.
We know that the Philippines has a common security treaty with the U.S. If the CCP were to launch an offense against the Philippines, the U.S. would intervene. The South China Sea, therefore, is a good testing ground for Beijing to gauge Washington's determination. If the friction with the Philippines escalates into a military confrontation and the U.S. responds decisively, Beijing can pull back and blame the U.S. for overreacting. But such an option doesn't exist in the Taiwan Strait. Therefore, the South China Sea has become a testing ground for Beijing and the CCP. On December 4th, a pro-CCP media in Hong Kong, Hong Kong 01, published an article spelling out the CCP's goal. The article compared the current situation in the South China Sea to 2013, when the Philippines and Vietnam both challenged China in the region. It claimed that China's military strength had increased dramatically in the past 10 years, and its control has improved and isn't what it used to be. The PLA's frequent monitoring of U.S. warships in the neighboring waters of the relevant islands and reefs is a symbol of its ability to deal with the U.S. military. The greater the chance of direct encounters between the military forces of China and the United States, the greater the likelihood of conflict. But this also precisely illustrates the problem. The South China Sea game is ultimately a problem between China and the United States. The article's title explicitly explained Beijing's goal. In South China Sea, the most important thing is to break the blind faith in the U.S. military capability. The Philippines is not to be feared. It further elaborated the idea like this: China may teach the Philippines a lesson or two, but the Philippines is absolutely not the main agenda for China. In the past, the military, political, and diplomatic support from the U.S. provided the backbone to certain countries to be provocative. Whether the U.S. military will support its allies in the disputed waters in the future will be the geopolitical weather vane. The most important task for China is to break the blind faith that these countries have in the U.S. military capability. The article also mentioned President Marcos Jr.'s speech in Hawaii on November 20th. After the APEC meeting, in which he said the Philippines has taken the initiative to contact Vietnam, Malaysia, and other countries in the hope of exploring the possibility of reaching a code of conduct in the South China Sea at the bilateral level. The Chinese article said, this negotiation, which excludes China, may lead to further intensification of the dispute in the South China Sea. The Chinese media claim that Vietnam and Malaysia's relationship with China are stable, and the two countries don't intend to challenge China in the South China Sea. Some experts say the CCP's series of provocations is also a form of psychological warfare. Similar to wolf warrior diplomacy, the goal is to intimidate the opponents and force them to accept CCP's aggressive behavior as normal behavior. To some extent, it has worked in Australia because the Albanese government didn't fight back. The CCP has used threat and intimidation against Taiwan for a long time and affected some people. There is a group of Taiwanese who adamantly believe that Taiwan should avoid war with the mainland at all costs, including making concessions and compromises with the CCP. Let me summarize. The CCP's provocative actions serve three purposes. 1, to intimidate the opponents. 2, to observe the opponents' reactions. And 3, to determine their resolve in defending Taiwan. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.